Welcome everyone for today's DACAT. We are June 7th, moving right along through the growing season. But good to have you on. I'm Jim McDermott, and I'm in the comfort of my office, but Paige is out in the field. So welcome, Paige, and good morning.
Yeah. So I'm actually out in some DKC 105.33 today. So that's my backdrop.
Well, better yet, not just in a field. You are in front of some really good corn then.
Yes.
Well, we, as usual, will start with the trivia question. So figured since we were in post-emerge spray time, and especially a lot of Extendamax getting sprayed, question for today is, and this again is for a fabulous prize. First person to answer this in the chat will be the winner. But when was dicamba first approved for use in the United States for sale? That's today's trivia question, and I'll give you a hint. It's been a few years, been around for a long time.
Yep.
Used pretty successfully, and very few resistance issues to date for a product that's been around this long. I'm guessing since there wasn't any answer in the first second, nobody knew it off the top of their head, but that's where the tools come in handy. Well, let's see. Looks like we've got an answer and a correct answer. Dave Simonson has 1962, and that is correct. So, David, you are the winner today. Well done. So,
Job.
dicamba has been around longer than I have been, so it's a long time. First introduced by Velsicol, and I think it's gone through several companies, different name changes, but dicamba molecule been around since 1962 as far as sales in the United States, and a heck of a lot of it getting sprayed this week, especially with the good spray conditions we have.
Yeah.
All right, well, congratulations, David. We'll put you in the Hall of Fame for the list of winners so far. We're up to 4 now. All right, here's our agenda, and we'll talk a little bit about moisture, GDU update, where we're at there. Uneven corn, Paige and I both get calls on that. Nutrient deficiencies, which sometimes contributes to the unevenness of corn. Herbicide issues too. And then we'll finish up on the corn rootworm hatch. We are just starting to get into an exciting time of the year as far as corn rootworm are concerned.
Yes.
But as usual, always open for questions, comments. We've got a number of us on the call right now, and I'm sure every one of you are seeing different things out in the field, both good and bad. But whatever you're seeing, it's always good to share with some of your counterparts, and hopefully we can all learn from each other. So, Paige, I'm going to start right in on the GDU update, and surprise, surprise, but we are running well ahead of normal. I'd heard from someone today that some of the weather reporting districts were talking about our average highs are running about 15 degrees ahead of normal for really over the last week. And, that's quite a bit when you put that in perspective. But on GDUs, for the 26th of April planting date, ranging from 108 to 154 as far as ahead of the long-term average. And really every planting date, and we'd put that in our newsletter on Monday, every planting date across the board, we are ahead on GDUs. So a lot of these days where we're staying warm at night, especially some of these nighttime lows are in the mid 60s or upper 60s. That's really accumulating GDUs quickly, moving this crop along very well. Of course, also adds a little bit to the stress. We'll talk about that here in a bit, but I'm still always of the opinion above normal heat units before pollination is a good thing, right, Paige?
I agree. Yes.
sometimes we can have too much of a good thing, but still, I would take the heat right now. So
Yeah, it's always
pre-tip.
yeah, it's always fun to look at that departure from normal. And if you all were on a few weeks ago, we had pulled this up and kind of compared. And gosh, at that time, that snapshot, we were kind of sitting pretty good. I know right now we could use a little bit in pockets. We've had some nice moisture in some areas, but yeah, it's been more of some pop-up type showers here or there. But this is what things look like right now as far as for last month departure from normal.
Yeah, a few pockets actually running ahead, northern Kasuth County. And then even some areas in Clay County that are slightly ahead over this last month. And then, of course, other areas where we're approaching 3 inches below normal for the last month, and usually May is a wetter month. So that is concerning. Um, of course, it's when you see a map like this, it doesn't tell the whole tale because of these spotty thunderstorms. Most afternoons we get something that brews up, and if you're lucky enough to be under the shower, that helps you out. But otherwise, these rains are very spotty. So any map like this doesn't really tell the whole tale of what's going on with moisture. Number of fields I was digging in yesterday, even in some dry areas down in Plymouth County, I was surprised that there was moisture. Once we got down 6-8 inches. Challenge is some of the roots are not there yet, especially the nodal roots. So that's contributing to some of the factors or some of the unevenness that we're seeing out there.
Definitely.
So Paige, you think we're actually hurt by any of the dry weather so far yet?
Right now, going out and looking at fields, I'm staging it around that V5, V6. So I don't get too excited at the moment. I mean, we need about 1/10 of an inch per day as far as water use per plant per day. So right now, I'm feeling okay. So hopefully we get some things coming through around that V10 time frame where we can see field loss.
Yeah, and that's the critical thing. We're on the edge, but and this corn obviously looks tough in the afternoons where we haven't had showers. You never like to see corn rolled, but this time of the year is the best time to have it rolled as far as that goes. We do you lose a little bit of the ability to take in sunlight when we're, say, a V6 plant and it's rolled,
Yeah.
but we've got a lot of the year to make that up. So right now, I don't think we've cut into yield whatsoever. But you always talk about the 10 days before pollination and then the 14 days after pollination as being some of the most critical times. And obviously we're a little ways off from that, roughly a month. But as of right now, I don't think we've really hurt ourselves on yield with the stress we've seen. But you get another 2 weeks down the road, and that's a different story. So growth stage wise, like Paige mentioned, we're getting into a lot of the V6 corn, and of course V6 to me is a very critical stage. For one thing, we've got the growing point coming above the ground, so we know we're more susceptible to wind damage, more susceptible to hail, just more susceptible to even some herbicide being sprayed. Also, of course, we're starting to form the rows around on that cob. So very critical that we do have nutrient availability, nitrogen and sulfur especially. Plants starting to use potassium. And again, we're not really under too much stress as far as the dry weather part, but if we are lacking nutrients as we're starting to form those rows around at V6, V7, then we can start cutting into yield.
Genetics does play a big role in that as far as the rows around, but you are correct as far as those stresses that we can come across during that time.
And hopefully we're way past the point where we've switched over to the nodal roots. V3, V4 is where we're going from the lateral seminal roots or the seedling roots to those nodal roots. And of course, that's when we tend to have more of the ugly corn stage during that transition. especially if there's something else going on with the nodal roots, if it's dry in the topsoil, or if we've got sidewall compaction or something else that's holding those nodal roots back, then that transition takes longer. How about on
Yes.
the bean side, Paige?
Yeah, Jim. Last week I did have a pretty intense pocket of hail in my neck of the woods. And then a few weeks prior, walking fields with crusting. So some different scenarios going on out there. Some fields just had the stem, no cotyledons and everything. So that's pretty much done for that plant. Oh, some of these fields did get the tops taken out, and there's just the cotyledons and those auxiliary buds. It did not take long for them to get engaged and get started growing. So we've got that there if that top growing point does get taken out. But also, as far as a few calls on plants that did have the cotyledons gone, and then only just that top leaf part. So that as long as we've got that top growing point, we should be just fine. But yeah, some of those crusting situations too. I mean, some of these fields when it did pull out of that little crust area, sometimes those cotyledons were ripped off. But a lot of different things going. But unique as far as soybeans, we've got hope in a lot of different places as far as to keep that plant growing.
Yeah, like you, I've been amazed at the recovery from both
Yeah.
hail as well as the crusting issues. Some cases there wasn't anything left as far as cotyledons or trifoliates, and they still were able to shoot from the axillary buds. So
Yep.
So last
amazing plant.
year, you got, looks like 30 gallons.
30 gallons, okay.
30 gallons, 10 on the 16th of May and 20 on the 19th of May.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
Yep. Are you going down there right now?
No, I'm gonna get
Yeah,
her, it'll probably
I have
next
to.
week when I get her, so.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure you had.
Have to mute everybody. Also, if you're looking at your phone, make sure you are on mute. Unless you want to ask a question, then you can sure come off mute. But yeah, as far as soybeans, this plant schematic shows we're at a V3. We're on that third node that's got a trifoliate out. We do know the label limit on dicambas in soybeans, V4 or June 12th. So we've looks like the timing on our growth stage as well as the calendar are going to be pretty close. But what do we got? Another 5 days officially to be spraying our dicamba.
Yes.
Mhm. All right, and as far as evaluating these stands, we've been talking about this for several weeks, but we're still making the calls on some of these cases, for hail or for crusting, and really for soybeans. I don't think that number has changed. 75,000 roughly is where I would be at as far as a keeper of a stand, and still want to make sure you've got good plant health. You don't want those plants to have bruising if it's been a hail situation. But if we've got a decently spread out 75,000, I would leave that. Because right now, as far as our planting date in early June here, we're roughly 80% yield potential with anything being planted now on soybeans.
Yeah, so corn rate planting assessments, yesterday I was at a few fields, just doing some replants as far as in pockets, that is, but as far as whole field situations in corn right now, not much of that activity, but it's looking like 18,000 and less is kind of that point in the calendar date and everything that we would say to replant. But gosh, Jim, I'm not finding much of that at the moment, so that's good.
Right, and hopefully we don't, Paige.
Yeah.
Yield potential is 75% and dropping fast. Probably even lower than that here in the next
Yeah.
few days. So, and the later we plant, the more we are at risk as far as standability and, of course, drought stress. Later planted corn just is not able to take that dry weather. So hopefully we don't have too many replants going. Overall, it's been a very light year on replants. Most of it's been in the wet holes where there's been some heavier rain events.
Yep.
Well, Paige, we have seen some uneven corn, and from the group too. I'm sure a lot of you have seen uneven corn. Certainly some beautiful fields out there as well. But, we go through this every year. A lot of the same reasons that we see from year to year. This year, though, I would say we're probably seeing a few new things. Obviously residue, and you think, okay, we've got a lot of warm soils by now, but that residue, even just from tying up nitrogen and sulfur, or the carbon penalty, sometimes it's referred to, that's slowing these plants down, keeping them yellow, keeping them stunted. Herbicide carryover, we had talked about this 2 weeks ago with the sulfentrazone. A number of products that we've both noticed seeing carry over this year. Obviously, lack of rainfall, lack of microbial activity. I had pulled some rainfall data from June 1st of last year to May 1st of this year. And, I thought there'd be probably areas that would be below 15 inches, and I'm sure there are. It happened to be where I pulled. It was running about 18 and a half inches over that time period. Of course, a lot of the labels say 15 inches is needed as far as rotating, say, a 10-month rotation. But what I did is look at rainfall in the months of December, January, and February, and that added up to several of these locations of at about 6.5 inches in those 3 months, which obviously we're not getting microbial activity then. So, that rainfall outside of the growing season, ended up only really bringing that total down below 15 inches. So I think that's part of the reason, obviously, with the dry weather, that we're seeing more carryover. Even this year's applications of herbicides, we've just seen things be a little more active. Seen some injury from obviously in the soybean side with their PPOs. That's showing up a lot. Some of the planting depth, again, some of these dry, fluffy soils, we've had some shallow planting. That's slowed nodal root development, which of course leads to a lot of other factors, nutrient uptake, moisture uptake. So, that's kept some of this corn uneven. And then obviously the dry topsoil, just plain limiting that nodal growth. The question that we had early on as far as the rootless corn or floppy corn, I've seen some of that where it really, you wouldn't think you would have rootless corn because the ground doesn't seem that hard, but somehow that that slice has opened up a little bit, and we've gotten some air down there, and those nodal roots just hardened off, and they weren't able to get established. So a little bit surprising to see some of that this year, with generally good soil conditions at planting, but it has shown up. I think just again a function of the dry topsoil.
Yeah.
And then a little bit on the anhydrous, even fall applied anhydrous has shown some burn. A lot of fields right now too. You can tell where the knife tracks are. Just showing that we haven't gotten those roots into the nitrogen, or the nitrogen hadn't moved a whole lot since last fall. And then of course manure applications, both from some compaction as well as just availability. Seen a lot of that take place, and it always amazes me, Paige. The corn isn't using a lot of nitrogen right now, but boy, if it's not there, it is noticed.
It's showing. Yeah, definitely. I would say as far as yesterday goes, yeah, a lot of calls on that residue piece. And you've really already covered this, Jim, but you think about it, there's some variability out there as far as emergence. And then again, going from that V3, changing over to those seminal nodal roots. Yeah, we're seeing that variability a little more pronounced. So I would say, gosh, within the next, even by the end of the week, first of next week, we're going to see this corn completely change, as we do every year.
Absolutely. Just curious from the group as far as other things you're seeing. Either put it in the chat or come off mute. I know there's a lot of different things going on right now. Most of it hopefully corrected by, or can be corrected by, some moisture and good growing conditions.
Yep.
This was later in the day yesterday. I was going by a field, actually happened to be a plot, but you can see the lower leaves getting a little yellow, especially on the margins. Dry soil, fairly loose soil. Pretty well guess potassium deficiency, and corn is starting to use potassium this time of the year. And one good rain away from being able to have uptake, because potassium's taken up by mass flow, so it needs moisture to move into that plant. And some cases we're just not getting it. But what we do see, and I know you had mentioned this too, Paige, as far as hybrid differences, this actually is a plot that in the background has 4784 looking darker green. This happens to be a new one, 9888. And, it just apparently doesn't have the nodal roots quite established as well, because it was showing more potassium deficiency and just more yellowing in general as compared to the hybrid right next to it. So sometimes just that timing of root growth can make a big difference.
Oh yeah, definitely. Carrie had made a comment about seeing some corn and herbicide. It kind of popped up. Can you read that? Some corn and soybeans, some herbicide damage in corn and soybeans.
Yep.
I
Yep,
don't.
and carries over west there, and they definitely need rain. That's where more of the chem damage is showing up, or in the drier areas where it just hasn't taken off and really had good growth yet.
Yes.
A few of the other things, herbicide related to some of the post-emerge activity that we're seeing. Some a lot of products again containing dicamba. And since it's been sprayed since 1962, we've seen some of this before, but every year is a little bit different. I think the heat, humidity, especially the humidity, probably made some of this dicamba a little bit more active. This is actually some Diflex sprayed, and some of these plants got a little floppy, a little bit twisted. And really this time of the year too, we're also seeing what we call the AGS, or accelerated growth syndrome. Sometimes it's not herbicide related, and you can just see those plants wrap and twist just from a very rapid growth phase that it goes through. Otherwise, just like some of the things, we'll go back here. Some of the things we're talking about is on soybeans. Picture on the left most likely has some PPO damage. Residua Pro is on that field, keeping those plants fairly yellowed. There is some browning in there, some of the speckling. And we do see differences by variety as well. This picture on the left does happen to be AG20XF1s, and that one is rated a little bit more sensitive to PPOs. In this particular field, that variety was showing it, and another variety wasn't. One of our other Asgrow varieties was not showing it. So that sometimes will throw people off. And then the one on the right kind of looks like a growth regulator, getting some of those top leaves, especially where the growing point is, a little bit cupped or curled. Also, some of that new growth is actually elongated. They've seen a fair amount of this in soybeans, and a lot of times it's clear cut and sometimes it's not. This particular case, I do think there may have been some stinger carryover, products like Resicor, Triple Flex with stinger components. Again, with the carryover we've had, seen some of that come onto the soybeans this year. I've seen some cases where there's just because of stress, sometimes residue stress again, that the soybeans will look like they have growth regulator injury, and it's not always herbicide related. So early on in the season, there it is very tough to distinguish, but both things have, I guess I've seen both things show up as what looks like growth regulator in soybeans early on.
So yeah, this is a field that I took a look at actually the other day, as far as wondering if there was IDC spots popping up. But in this particular situation, it was across the entire area. So it was again behind on moisture, dry. You can see those white bleaching type on the edges of the leaves. And this is characteristic of HPPD carryover, which I have out there the year before. And then if you look really close, there is some bronzing on those bottom leaves also, and most likely PPO characteristics there. And this particular variety, this is 21XF2, and it is average as far as for PPO, so it can handle some, but I suspect that's what's going on. And what I've noticed the past 3 years, we've had some dry conditions across my territory, it typically always comes out of both of these situations.
That seems to be the common theme, dry weather, but, goes through a stress period, but especially on beans, they can look pretty tough, get beat up and recover fairly well.
Yes. And bugs. One,
Yeah.
one thing to think about for bugs, I think the last few times we were kind of wondering what things would transpire with black cutworm. We really didn't see much with that, but this is kind of one of the next things to think about. And Jim, like you alluded to earlier, we are ahead on GDUs, so we might be getting our spades out a little sooner, doing some root digs. What do you think?
Definitely. Yeah. Again, high growing degree units are good, but they're also good for the bugs, and it's bringing them along. I did have a grower by Holstein. Um, Monday, I was talking to him, and he said Sunday night he had seen a lightning bug. So that's quite early. That was actually the 4th of June. I haven't seen one myself yet, but I'm sure we're about to. Based on growing degree units, especially for what's called soil GDUs, the base 52 from the first of the year, we should be right in the middle of our hatch. About 50% of the hatch should have happened at most locations in northwest, north central Iowa. So they're out there, just a matter of finding them early on. Of course, most of what you're going to see is just some scarring on roots. As small as they are, it gets very, very difficult to see them. But I'm sure they're going to be coming on strong. Still always a guessing game as far as what fields are going to have pressure. We know based on last year's beetle counts, we'd expect some pretty high pressure, especially to the western edge of northwest Iowa, but also really in a lot of areas like Palo Alto County and Kossuth County, Pocahontas County. So always have to be on the watch, and especially our corn on soybean fields. We know 2 years ago we did have some high extended diapause pressure, and we're back in those soybean fields again. So do have to make sure we're keeping an eye on those fields.
Yes.
You seen any rootworm yet yourself, Paige?
Oh, I did a lot of digging yesterday in corn, and I was really, really looking some corn on corn, but I haven't seen any yet. And like you said, that first instar is pretty tiny, so maybe in a few weeks we'll see some more activity.
Yeah, I always like to check volunteer corn. Usually that's a good place, and you're in especially corn on corn fields. Obviously where there's going to be pressure, but some of the unprotected corn is where you can spot them first, and gives you an idea where you're at. Obviously, rescue treatments in season are very limited. Um, some of the products that are left as far as liquid, need the ideal rain to get activated, and even then, it's pretty limited. And as well as some of the granulars, trying to do lay-by treatments for granular is very limited. So more just about making sure that we've got that we're monitoring and we've got a handle on the situation. And then, of course, if we're looking at heavy pressure, we've got to be ready to spray beetles in some of these fields. If we're running ahead of schedule, we may have beetles out before we even have silk emergence, and that's when it starts to get critical as far as protecting those silks.
A question that I get now and then is, what's the larva threshold? And I think I don't know if there exactly is one, but as far as like a red flag, if you're finding 2 to 3 larvae per root, I mean that's something to keep in mind and to continue to monitor those fields, just in case you do need a rescue treatment later on. Yeah.
And I would encourage everybody, if you get a chance, be looking, especially at your Smart Stacks Pro. We know that's the best thing out there right now for rootworm control. But if you've got a comparison with Smart Stacks or with Chrome, DuraCade, those are the ones to target to dig and see what type of differences we're seeing out there.
Yep.
See, we had a question about gall midge, and that's an interesting topic because there has been adults found in Nebraska. Mead, Nebraska, early last week, the 30th, I believe, is when the first emergence was officially documented. and then a few other locations later in the week on Friday. So they are starting to emerge. All of that's either east central or southeast Nebraska, so it's a little farther south than us. But I would expect coming up here over the next week, we potentially could start to see emergence. And the critical thing is if you've got soybean plants that are V2 or larger and they're starting to show cracking or fissures down near the soil line, that's how that larvae is able to actually get in and do the damage. So once we're getting into, most of our beans are V2 or larger, so we're getting into that stage. Obviously, treatments are very limited. Some of the more effective treatments actually has been hilling or throwing up dirt next to the plant. That does seem to protect it, just providing a physical barrier so eggs are not able to be laid. Otherwise, as far as the insecticide treatments, they've been kind of hit and miss, but there have been a little bit of success shown this time of the year, just doing a liquid spray around the edges of the field. But we haven't gotten the timing yet as far as when that would take place. And again, it's hard to get that timing down pat, and treatments are not 100% by any means. But we'll try to keep an eye on that, and if it gets into that point where it's starting to trigger the timing for an application, we'll certainly be letting people know.
Yes.
Well, Paige, we are at 8:32, so
Nice.
we've used our allotted time. Definitely would be open though for questions. Flip it over here to the last slide. So we do have the QR code for those that are CCAs. You can go ahead and scan that and get half credit for crop management. But certainly open up for questions, comments from the groups, or other things that you are seeing out there.
A lot of stuff going on out there. Anything that we missed or that stood out to you all?
And a heck of a week for spraying it. I don't remember this time of the year having single digit winds pretty much every day. Which when you're walking fields and it's 93 degrees isn't always the most fun thing, is it, Paige?
It was hot yesterday. Goodness.
Yeah. But for spray wise, and of course, those of you that are spraying dicamba, the XtendiMax app is a good reference. I just looked at it this morning, and gives you the risk for inversion, and then the risk too if you're getting into no wind or 1 mile an hour or 2 mile an hour winds. Ideally 3 to 10 is where we like to be. But it's like most of those conditions, or the real still conditions, were early in the morning or in the evenings when we're really not labeled to spray anyway.
Yep. Well, thanks everybody for being on. If there's no questions, we will get reporting out everything later on, and also this file right here, so you can refer back to it if you.
Absolutely. Well, Paige, thanks for joining us from the field, and that 105.33 looks pretty good behind you. What stage is it at anyway?
It's at V5, almost V6 out here. So yeah, looking pretty nice.
Yeah, nice color. Looks good. All right, well, we will wrap it up. Thanks everyone for being on, and have yourself a good day.
Thank you.